Welcome to the show. I'm Doug Johnson, and this is The Business of Life. During each show, we talk with someone who is a local celebrity, and they offer to give us 3 strategies for success during the show. But in addition, we talk about any number of things. And today, we're going to focus a little bit on education. Our guest today is Derran Wimer. Derran, welcome to the show.
Hi, Doug. Thanks.
We are old friends.
We are.
We go way back, and I'm not going age-wise, Derran. I'm going,
I appreciate that.
Friendship-wise, And we recently reconnected, and just so happy to do that, and happy we're able to reconnect today and talk a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
So, Derran, you have been an educator all of your life.
I have.
You started in college, if I remember correctly, with a degree in biology.
That's correct.
And you went from biology, and I don't know how quickly you did this, but you went from biology to education. So tell us, number one, what are you doing now? And then number two, tell us your backstory.
Sure. I'll start with my backstory. How's that? So I graduated from Allegheny College in Pennsylvania in biology. And Allegheny had an education program that ran in Cleveland. And so it was called an urban immersion program, where you lived downtown and you taught in one of the city schools in Cleveland. So we lived on East 9th and Superior. That's where our residence was for student teaching, and I taught at Shaw High School in East Cleveland. And I wanted to do teaching because I wasn't sure. I really enjoyed biology and enjoyed the research side of biology, but I wasn't confident in job prospects in 1980 in that area. And so I wanted to have...
You are giving your age away.
Yes, I did give that away, right. But I wanted to have a career that I could fall back on, so to speak. And so when I did my student teaching at Shaw, I fell in love with the kids. I really enjoyed that experience. And so I decided to try to get a job in teaching. And the program at Allegheny required, in order to get licensed in Ohio, I had to get a job within 30 miles of Cleveland. And so I put on my corduroy suit and I Boy Scout backpack and started stopping at every school district in late May and asking if they had any openings. And Copley-Farallon outside of Akron had an opening, and so I ended up teaching 7th grade science and 10th grade biology there. Did that for 6 years. And then became the assistant principal there at Copley. Was there for 3 years, and then I was lucky enough to end up as the principal in Twinsburg. And I was at what was Chamberlain High School.
Right.
And that's where we met when I was at Chamberlain. And I loved my time in Twinsburg. But I had an opportunity to go to a bigger district with a bigger high school, so I ended up in Berea. And I was the principal at one of the high schools there called Mid Park, which served Middleburg Heights and Brook Park. That's Mid Park. And most people don't know that, right? And so I was there for 4 years as principal, and then I was given the opportunity to be the assistant superintendent there, and then ended up as superintendent. And I served as superintendent for 6 years, and then retired from public education in 2011. And just coincidental to that, I was contacted. I had no plans to. I was going to retire, and
retire.
Yes, do something completely different. And I was contacted by a search firm, and asked me if I'd be interested in running a nonprofit in Summit County called Summit Education Initiative. And so I did that for 9 years. And that was an awesome transition from the hectic pace of being a superintendent of a large suburban school district, and then getting a chance to build an organization really from the ground up at Summit Education Initiative. And then I left there right before the pandemic. Wasn't coincidental to that, it just happened, or wasn't caused by the pandemic. I just had announced I was going to leave. And now I do consulting. I work with school districts that need help in leadership, board relations with the superintendent. I run focus groups for school districts if they need that. And then I also am an evaluator for the Martha Holden Jennings Foundation, which is a foundation that solely funds public education in Ohio. And so in that role, I go out 6 or 7 times a month to different locations around the state that have those organizations have received funding from the Jennings Foundation to implement a project, usually in school, sometime with out of school time programs. And I sit with the people who are doing the work and observe the work, observe the program in action, talk with them about their budget and how they're expending the grant funds, and do some coaching with that sometimes depending on the organization, and some networking to help them maybe work with other organizations doing similar work around the state, and then file a report with the Jennings Foundation. So it's a nice, I'm still in touch, I'm still tuned in, but I get to schedule my days.
Yeah, well, right, and
Yeah.
keep your brain active at the same time.
Right.
That's great. Talk a little more, if you would, please, about the Summit Education Initiative, because I think not many people are aware that there is something out there like that. So what did you do? What was the whole purpose of that nonprofit?
Sure. So the organization's been around since '94, and it was organized by philanthropists and some key industry leaders in Summit County in response to really alarming reading scores that were released, particularly with the Akron Public Schools, but in general across the county. And so these organizations and some of these civic leaders decided to put this a nonprofit together. So they cobbled together several $1 million to establish an endowment that would at least fund the beginning operating costs of a nonprofit that would support the work of improving those scores and improving educational outcomes. That was back in '93, and with lots of nonprofits, there were kind of starts and stops, and a lot of those depend on who's in charge and what's going on in the environment at the time. And so when I started in '11, the organization was kind of at a restart, and so we got to design that the way that we wanted to, and establish a vision of, it's really about economic prosperity. I mean, is when it all comes down to improving educational outcomes. We want well-educated people in our country, in our world, for our government to work, for society to work, and for commerce to work. And so the more educated we are as a population, the more prosperity we can have. And there is a ton of research out there linking college degree attainment with a level of prosperity, and also linking college degree attainment or credential attainment with reducing negative outcomes, whether that be poverty, childhood poverty, crime rates, drug rates, unwanted pregnancies. All of those numbers go down as the educational level of the population increases. And so that was our job at SEI, was to drive that engine to help the communities understand that it's important that we achieve higher levels of educational attainment for everyone. Not that everyone should go to college, we never were saying that, but we were saying that graduates today are going to need a higher level of education than ever before. And we need more graduates to reach those levels of high educational attainment so that our communities can prosper. And so that was our work. And we did that with, I surrounded myself with really smart people, and I had the opportunity to hire people, and I was able to get some really smart people from a lot of different fields to work with us, and we built kind of a data nerd system of predictive modeling where we could build predictive models that would help schools from preschools to all the public schools and many of the non-public schools in Summit County, and 3 of our major higher education institutions that most of our graduates go to in the county. We were able to build these predictive models would say that if students look like this in 3rd grade, we can predict what their outcomes are going to be in 8th grade math 4 or 5 years later. We can predict that. So if we know that, and those children are sitting in your classroom right now, we know that there's a handful of children in your classroom that don't fit that profile. In other words, we're not going to meet those goals 4 years later. Intervene.
Those are the ones who need the help.
Here they are, raise the red flag and develop a plan to help those students and intercept them so that you can prove those models wrong. I mean, that's what we would always share with the staff members and administrators we talk to is prove us wrong. Prove to us that these models that we're saying are going to predict outcomes for your children are incorrect. So that's what we did. And then we built tools to support the schools, to support out-of-school time providers, to support preschools, to give to parents or to help the teachers themselves. A lot of them were to give to families so that they could help their own children.
So, I mean, that is really interesting and really great. And you've been on both sides. You've actually been in education, so you know what the children's experiences are there. And then, excuse me, you've worked with SEI to develop these models and so on and so forth. How do you see the whole education process changing over the years? And you've been around for a while. So, you and I were talking earlier about Gen Z, Generation Z. How does all this work, excuse me, with Generation Z and what we're seeing today? So
a couple of thoughts came to mind when you were asking that question. The first thing that came to mind is a philosophy that we used at SEI, is that we work with the schools and with the organizations, not on them. And I think it's really important as a school principal here in Twinsburg or in Berea or Copley or as a superintendent, I always welcomed anybody who would help. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce, when I tried to welcome you to the high school when you were at the Chamber and I was at Chamberlain High School. But I wanted you to work with us, not on us. Right. And so I think that philosophy still applies, even though what education looks like today is completely different than what you and I experienced certainly as students, and that I experienced even 10 or 11 years ago. When I go into a classroom today to observe for the Jennings Foundation, it's a completely different classroom than what I observed just 12 years ago when I was still a superintendent. The integration of technology into the students' lives is much more, it's nearly seamless now. Just a couple weeks ago, I was in a high school environment where the teachers were fully engaging with artificial intelligence rather than fighting it, which, you kind of have that initial reaction is like, oh no, the students are going to use artificial intelligence to, get the answers, to create, plagiarized papers, all those things, essays, right? And after you get past that initial fright of this new technology that's being introduced, whether we invited in or not, then I saw these teachers embracing it and using it with the students in the classroom with their smartphones out to do work that was that they were learning the concepts that we want them to learn, but they were just seamlessly embedding that technology. So I think that mindset of incorporating the newest technology with cautions and all the protections that we can build around them so that everything's age appropriate and safe for the kids, that's happening. And the sooner we can adopt that, the more aptly we're going to be able to engage the kids today, because the kids at home are doing this, right?
Right.
They're using this, right? They're on their phones. They're using Google AI now, right? So that they're not just Googling something, they're actually using the AI tool, which is in Google. And so as professionals in the education community, we have to embrace all this.
Well, and so the next question, Derran, is how do those of us not in the education community actually become involved and learn how to use that ourselves? Because then that opens a line of communication between us older people and our children or grandchildren. We can open lines of communication if we know what they're doing. So how do we learn how to do that?
Right. So I would type in Chat GPT and just open it up and start playing. Just play with it. And that's just one of many artificial intelligence systems that are out there now. They're emerging. There are new ones emerging every day. But just start playing with it. It's harmless to play with, and just ask questions, and it'll generate answers for you. And ask silly questions, because then you'll see the mistakes that the intelligence is still making, because it's still, it's learning.
Right.
Right, and which is what's incredible, is it's learning as it's doing this, and so it's getting better and better by the second. But that's how you learn, is by playing with it a little bit, and then you can have fun with your kids. There's a artificial intelligence called DALL-E, D-A-L-L-E, and that does artwork, two-dimensional art. And you can say, I'd like you to draw me a red-haired, four-legged chicken with, whatever comes into your imagination, and it will draw that for you.
Wow.
And then you can say, blue, I'd rather than red hair, let's make it blue, and it'll change it. Or rather than four, let's have 3 legs, or let's have it flying, and it will adjust that for you. And so it's just fun to do that. And then that's something fun that you can do with your grandkids or your kids, and also show them that you're not out of it yet, right? You're still
Which is
with
one
it.
of the important things,
right?
For sure.
Right.
So how do you see this impacting society? Gen Z, obviously ages, 12 to 24, roughly. And obviously a big difference between the 24-year-olds and the 12-year-olds. But how is that impacting what they are going to do in the future?
Yeah. Well, I wish I had an answer to that question, because it's really hard to predict that, because don't you think that everything is so rapid now? The change is so rapid, and it's hard to predict what the kids that are sitting in classrooms, if they're even in classrooms today, they may be at home doing their work, right? The kids that are in 4th grade or 7th grade, what it's going to look like in 15 years when they're in the workforce, whatever that looks like. And so, again, it goes back to the fundamentals of education, right? We want to raise children who are smart, who are well-rounded, who have a well-rounded education, who can consider and thoughtfully problem solve, because whatever those jobs are that they're going to start into are certainly going to change, and they're going to change much more rapidly than the jobs that we've experienced in our lifetimes.
Right.
And so having that, having the most educated group of students that we can have leaving our schools, entering into the workforce, is going to benefit them as their job markets continue to change, and benefit business as they're continuing to evolve to whatever the demands in the workplace might be.
One of the things, Derran, that you just said that kind of triggered something was the term well-rounded. And that brings to mind that many places in our country are starting to ban books. Some of these books are classics.
Right.
So what effect and what is your opinion of that, number one? And I think I know what it is, but what is your opinion of that, and how do you think that is going to affect our kids today?
So my response always is the extreme response is probably never a good one. And so it always has to be measured. And so when we talk about removing books from library shelves or classrooms, you know, there has to be recognition that there's been consideration already for why these books are there. It isn't that every book that's ever been published is available to every child at any age level in a school district. It's thoughtful. There's a process of why these books or these stories that are in anthologies are included in books. And so to limit that is, I believe, to limit opportunities for kids to think differently than perhaps they've grown up with, in the culture they've lived in the family they've lived in. But for us to live in a diverse society and an ever-growing diversity, we need to have empathy for all walks of life and all circumstances across the world. And the only way we can learn that is to have exposure to it. And there needs to be trust in the professionals, whether those be librarians in our public systems or the curriculum experts in school districts, to have materials that are age appropriate, maturity level appropriate for the students. I had an experience when I was a principal in Berea where I walked into the office one day and there was a gentleman sitting there, and I'm there at like 6:30 in the morning, and he was there. And he was not happy. And he was a father of one of our 12th grade girls. And he was also a Vietnam veteran and a chaplain. And he had a book in his hand. And he laid the book on my desk and he said, "My daughter is being made to read this book." And when I first saw it, I saw the picture on the cover and it was of military. He thought, "Oh, I'm interested in that because I served in the military." He opened it up and he was objecting to the rough language that was in the book. There were cuss words in the book. And so I had never read the book before, but I glanced through the book and I was like, yeah, I appreciate your point as a father, and that this is objectionable. And our conversation went like this. I said, "But you were in war. You know, was this the kind of language?
Was this the norm?
Was this what was happening?" He goes, "Yeah, it was, but I don't want my daughter to be exposed to this." And I said, "Okay." I said, "I appreciate that." So I said, "Let me check with the teacher. I really don't know." As the principal, we've got thousands of books. And so he was gracious and gave me that time. And went and checked, and it was in our novels class. It was an elective class, and kids had a list of 50 or 60 novels they could choose to read, and they were going to choose 6 of them over the course of the semester. She chose this one. She's 18 years old. She's a senior. So this wasn't an assigned reading. This was an elective reading that she had chosen to read. There were even short explanations about each of the books in the listing of the books so the kids knew. Now, it didn't say that there were swear words in it, but anyway, so went back with the father and said, "You know, here's the whole story on this. You know, she chose the book and it wasn't assigned. She can choose another book. Feel free to, you know." And so he had her do that. But he asked us to review that book to see if it was appropriate. And so we did that. We went through the whole process. And it took a couple months. And we invited him to be part of that process. And as he went through that process and brought his religious beliefs forward in his training as a chaplain, and then listened to the discussion among all the adults that were considering this, at the end of it, he was totally comfortable with that. and it was a problem solved that was amicable in every way, except that had that happened today, it would have been on Twitter feeds and
Right.
or X feeds and Facebook feeds, and it would have been on perhaps on the news, and that there would have been this immediacy to judgment rather than thoughtful, measured, mature discussions
Right.
that led to a reasonable solution.
And that's what
Right.
we need. Darren, we don't have much time left, but I do want to talk with you about your 3 strategies for success. And as we talked earlier, the first one that came to your mind was that culture matters and you are responsible for it. The second one is that it's not about your success, it's about everyone else's. And number 3 is learn from other fields. In the minute or 2 we have left, can you kind of just bring those all together for us?
Sure. So I thought of those in terms of I've had opportunities to be the person with the title of a leader in different organizations. And I've always approached that it's not about me being successful. I'll be successful as a high school principal or as a dad or as a superintendent or executive director of a nonprofit if the people who are working with me are successful. And if I can work with them to help them reach success professionally in the role that they have in the organization, but also with their personal goals, their professional aspirations. Maybe they don't want to work at Twinsburg High School forever. They want to do something else, and if I can help them with that, then as an organization, we're going to achieve our goals. We are going to, because we're all going to be working for the same purpose on that. And that kind of goes into the climate idea.
Right, the culture, yeah.
That you build a culture that is, I use climate and culture interchangeably, but culture is really, it's my responsibility as the person that's in charge of the organization to set the culture, to pay attention to the culture all the time, to massage it, to contribute to it, to make sure that it's a high-achieving culture that supports the people who are supporting, in my case, the kids, and what we're trying to do with the students. And the last thing is, as a leader, I think I can learn more from studying other fields, other professions, than just staying in the education world. So I read business books, I read sales books, I read books by doctors who talked about lists that are important, for correct surgeries and so on. So, and I learned from those and apply those back to.
It all comes down to learning is so important.
Right.
Darren, we're out of time, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been great.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Doug.